You know that feeling when you've just finished coding a new tool? That rush? It's awesome. But then comes the big question. What's next? Well, let me tell you a story about my first OSINT tool, User Recon, and the surprisingly wild and honestly pretty funny journey of getting it published on the Python Package Index, or Pypi. Right? This is the exact spot every single developer finds themselves in. The code is clean, it runs perfectly on your machine, and you've got this awesome thing that you're proud of. But it's just sitting there. How do you get it out into the world for other people to actually use? So what's the first thing you do in this situation? Come on, you know the answer. You ask ChatGPT. The advice was pretty straightforward. First, get it on GitHub. Check, done. Then I thought about the App Store, but man, that seemed way too complicated for a first-timer. So the choice became clear. Pypi. It looked so much more beginner-friendly. And that, right there, is where the real adventure began. Okay, so Pypi it is, but you quickly learn you can't just drop your files in there and call it a day. No, you have to play by their rules. And rule number 1 led me straight to this mysterious and crucial file I was missing, something called setup.py. And this setup.py, it felt like a gatekeeper. I literally could not move forward without figuring out what it was and what it wanted from me. So the big question became, what in the world is this file? After a bit of frantic Googling and, you guessed it, asking ChatGPT again, it all started to make sense. The best way to think about setup.py is as the instruction manual for your project. It's this one file that tells PyPI everything it needs to know to install and manage your tool correctly. So what goes into this manual? Basically, all the vital stats. You've got the tool's name, the version number, a little description, a list of all the other packages it depends on, all the critical details. Getting this file right is like the absolute foundation of this whole process. All right, the setup.py file is written, and I slapped a very hopeful version 1.0.0 on it. It was time to actually build the package. This should have been a single, simple command. Instead, it kicked off a phase that was, well, let's just call it a comedy of errors. This was it, the command that was supposed to neatly wrap everything up. Python-m build. Simple, right? Instead, it was like opening Pandora's box. It triggered a whole series of frustrating, baffling errors that sent me down a deep, dark rabbit hole of package distribution. And that first error, wow, it was just a brick wall of text. You know the kind of talking about, total gibberish. It made zero sense. So what do? Back to ChatGPT I went, pasting in this giant cryptic message and just hoping it could translate it into English for me. The answer was not what I expected. The problem was so simple, it was almost funny. ChatGPT told me my README file was missing, but it wasn't. It was sitting right there in the folder. The real issue? In my README, I had used triple single quotes for a code block instead of triple backticks. That's it. A single character choice brought the entire build process to a screeching halt. Unbelievable. Okay, deep breath, fix the silly quote, feeling confident. I run the build command again, and bam! Another error, of course. At least this one was in plain English, but it was still a total roadblock. The build process just refused to see my README file. So this new error led to the discovery of another file I'd never heard of, manifest.in. It turns out you have to explicitly tell the build process, hey, please grab these other files that aren't Python code. It doesn't just automatically pick up your documentation or other data files. You have to list them out. And once I knew that, the fix was laughably easy. Create a new file called manifest.n, add one single line to it, include readme.md. I ran the build command one more time, held my breath, and it worked. Finally, success. The project was built. So the build is done. I'm feeling unstoppable. It's time to finally upload this thing to Pypi. But this is when the most classic, most frustrating problem in all of software development decided to make an appearance. The bug that only shows up after you deploy. The upload worked perfectly. I ran pip install user recon on my machine, and it worked. My tool was officially on the index. I felt like I was on top of the world. And then I tried to actually run it, and crash. An immediate error. That sinking feeling in your stomach when you realize it works on my machine is a complete and total lie. Phantom bug number 1 was a sneaky one. The project was missing an init.py file.
See, when you're running code locally, Python is often smart enough to figure things out without it. But when it's a real package installed from Pypi, you absolutely need that file to tell Python, hey, this directory is a package. And the craziest part? The file can be completely empty.
So the fix was easy, just add a blank file. But that meant going through the whole song and dance again. Bump the version number up to 1.0.1, rebuild the package, re-upload it, and just pray that this time, this was the final fix. But it wasn't. Nope. Installed the new version, tried to run it, and bam, another immediate error, module platforms not found. This was the trickiest one of all. Locally, a simple import platforms worked just fine. But when your code is installed as a package, Python needs you to be explicit. It requires a relative import from .import platforms to find other files within its own package. That little dot makes all the difference. So let's tally it up. In total, it took four different versions uploaded to Pypi to finally squash all of these little bugs. 4 separate builds to fix issues that were completely invisible when I was developing on my own machine. Talk about learning things the hard way. But after all the errors, the debugging, the re-uploads, after all that frustration, the moment of truth finally arrived. And this is where all that perseverance didn't just lead to a working tool, it led to some really valuable lessons. And then, that perfect moment. I installed version 1.0.3, ran the command, and nothing. No errors, no crashes. It just worked. Ah, that feeling of pure triumph. That moment you finally conquer the problem. That's why we do this, right? Well, you know, the working tool wasn't even the biggest prize. It was what I learned through the struggle. I finally understood how Python packaging actually works. I saw with my own eyes just how different a development environment is from a production one. And boy, it really hammered home why "it works on my machine" is the most dangerous phrase in tech. And more than anything, it proved that patience isn't just a virtue, it's a core engineering skill. And that really leads to the ultimate takeaway from this whole odyssey. Every single error, every failed build, every phantom bug, none of them were failures. They were just a necessary part of the process. The mistakes are what actually build your knowledge. So I'll just leave you with this question. Instead of trying to avoid mistakes, maybe we should start embracing them as the building blocks of our next success. So think about your own projects. What frustrating, comical, or difficult mistakes are just waiting out there to teach you something incredible?